But it's weird when you find out, like, as a filmmaker, that there are all these, like, legal rules only if you want to release your movie on a mass scale in theaters and sell it commercially through normal distribution channels. I'm sure you can do whatever you want, but if you want to get clearance for stuff, you have to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
you better know at some point.
Clearance for like what?
Clearance like images or things like that. Like,
like,
what do they call it? Errors and omissions?
Use someone else's thing.
Right. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I'm Chris Gore.
Dante James.
And we're here at the Scum and Villainy Cantina and joined by Boots Riley, the director of Sorry to Bother You.
What's up?
Hey, Dante and I saw the film the other night. And we're left with so many feelings and so much to talk about. So we're just ecstatic that you're here. And your look, we're gonna take pictures, which we're gonna post on social media because
okay. Oh well,
the
I got
fashion.
The
Fashion's such a big part of the movie, right? Like,
Very unique fashion.
Unique fashions that make statements, a lot of powerful images. Obviously, the trailer is very funny. If you've seen the trailer for Sorry to Bother You, very funny, but there's much more to this film. And so we're going to get into it.
Cool. Cool.
So, Bruce, why don't you tell the audience what the movie's about, in your words?
Well, I like to not tell too much about it, but what I do say is that it's an absurdist dark comedy with magical realism and science fiction inspired by the world of telemarketing. And what the other part, I guess this much is revealed in the trailer, is that Cassius Green, played by Lakeith Stanfield, is a black telemarketer with self-esteem issues and existential angst who discovers a magical way to make his voice sound like it's overdubbed by a white actor. That white actor is David Cross. And from there, it goes. And really the other answer to what it's about a lot of stuff.
Sure.
You know, like, I wanted to make a film that you couldn't... there are a lot of ways to say what this film is about, but they'll all be wrong because of omission, right? And I wanted to make something that was more akin to a novel,
right?
Because like where, in the sense that, you know, if you look at like great novels, it would be really hard to say, you know, what 100 Years of Solitude is about, or what Song of Solomon is about, or any, you know, there are all these details. What is you know, and probably an influence on the movie is like Invisible Man. What's that about?
Sure.
You know, there's every scene is about a lot of things, and obviously there are themes, and there's a storyline that's cohesive that I could tell you the plot, but I'm not going to. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But yeah. So,
well, it's funny because there's things about this movie that, you know, one of my first jobs out of high school was telemarketing, and I just sat there watching it thinking, I remember these days, man. I remember having to do the quote unquote white voice, and you know, didn't want too much bass in my voice because I didn't want to scare folks. And just the grueling, you know, call after call, and then getting people who, you know, like in the film, they're going through a tragedy, and you're still trying to sell them, and so I related to all of that.
Yeah.
But even the cool visual way that you told it wasn't like he wasn't just making the calls; he was with them in the same frame. I thought that was just like a very clever way of illustrating that. So
yeah. I mean, I wanted to, with all of the stuff, I wanted to make sure that the audience felt that I brought them through a similar experience, not just that you believe that this character felt that, but, you know, I wanted to simulate throughout the movie the feeling that comes when you discover new ideas and your view on the world changes. And so I wanted to take the audience through that.
It almost felt a little like Idiocracy, kind of a more modern Idiocracy, the way that society, the disparity between the rich and the poor, that gap just continues to grow and grow. I mean,
well, we do have President Camacho in the movie.
And we have President Camacho
in real life.
It's shot. Yeah. No, I love that.
Yeah,
Terry
yeah.
Crews is just like, he's so spot on. I love that guy. But yeah, I mean, there was an element of that. Like, where did that come from? And it's almost kind of frightening because they make this lifestyle. You can kind of sign your life over to a company where you can do a job where all of your needs are taken care of. And I kind of feel like this is not. I mean, it's science fiction as the way it's played in the movie. It's not science fiction.
It's not real. I mean, the question. There are some of the things in the movie that are outrageous that you could probably be done.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about that after the film. We were saying that, this could seem a little out there, but if you really think about it, how far away from that are we really? Like, we're not. Things can happen, man. And the way that corporations are, the way that science is where it is now. Like, things can happen.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really that far out.
Yeah.
If we really think about it.
Yeah. And I wanted to make a world that wasn't too far away from it because
Sure.
A lot of times people have tried to make statements about the world through science fiction.
Sure.
And been so far off into the science fiction that people, even though they might get some of the allegory, it's so different of a world that they don't really feel like it applies to them when they're watching.
Right.
So one example is like Terry Gilliam was always saying how he was frustrated that when people watched Brazil, they thought it was supposed to be in the future. But he was saying, no, that's right now. And part of that was just in the production design. He went so far away from what really is that you feel like, oh, it must be in the future. Star Wars. I was reading this book called The Conversations. That was Walter Murch talking to Michael Ondaatje, and so Walter Murch was part of Zoetrope, American Zoetrope, and they all went up to the Bay Area to make this radical film collective with Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas and all this. And after George made American Graffiti, he wanted to make his dream was to make what became Apocalypse Now. He wanted to do something based on Heart of Darkness. And it was his project all along, except his thing was much more radical politically. He was making a movie that was following the Viet Cong as the protagonists who were fighting the United States. And one of their people had defected to the other side and was helping out the United States. And they had to go get that guy and do all this stuff. And their Kurtz basically was someone working for the United States who had become very powerful and almost like their leader. Mm-hmm. And they were told, George, well, you can't get that made. It's politically too radical. And he's like, but I just made a very popular movie, American Graffiti. Why can't I get this made? Politically, nobody's going to fund this. He said, well, okay, how about if I take that same story and make it happen in space? And that's where Star Wars came. The rebels were the Viet Cong, and the Empire was the United States. This is according to Walter Murch and confirmed by a couple other people that I talked to. And obviously, one of the most popular stories in the world, having this radical premise, it didn't do a damn thing.
Sure. Right.
It sold a lot of toys.
Sold a lot of toys.
Yeah.
And it's because it doesn't matter. I mean, Star Trek, they live in a socialist world, or supposedly.
Right.
But it doesn't matter because it's in space. It's so far out into the future. We're not, I'm quite sure a lot of Republicans love Star Trek,
right.
And have no qualms with the story because it's not connected to real life. So I wanted to make something that, even though it used those elements, was something you couldn't separate from your world.
Well, and plus, I just feel like the motivations of the lead character, were motivations any, especially young black man, could relate to. We could relate to wanting more. We could relate to seeing other people having, stuff, and us wanting the same thing, wanting to make, we can all relate to those guys in the hood who are still there right now that we went to school with and grew up with, who never made it out, and not wanting to be those guys, and so I really kind of connected with that. Like I remember just being young and hungry and wanting kind of more for my life, and that's something that, the lead character, Cassius, I think he's such a relatable character in that way that it does keep you grounded into the movie.
Yeah. And some of that is the writing. Some of it is the amazing performance by Lakeith Stanfield, and his style is one that is not like many other actors. He makes choices that other actors wouldn't make. He is not someone who you say, when you get to point B, you feel this feeling. No, you talk about the whole situation and what that scene, you better construct a scene that makes him feel that.
Sure.
As opposed to being like, oh, I'm supposed to be angry here, and this is what I'm going to do. He tries to let the thing, make him feel how he's going to feel. So it comes across much more subtly.
Yeah, and he is amazing in the film. For those who aren't familiar with the name Lakeith Stanfield, he was he's been in movies like Get Out. He's in the show Atlanta with Donald Glover, and he's amazing in that. And the guy is just brimming with talent, man.
Well, what I also loved is the fact that you brought up Star Wars having this. I mean, George Lucas has always mentioned it was an analogy for Vietnam, and certainly that was an influence because he didn't even start writing Star Wars in the early 70s. So it was a passion project for years. But what I like, but no one would ever draw that. If you just saw Star Wars, no one would think Vietnam, right?
No, not at all.
But what I love that you did is you just spell shit out. Like, there are like billboards that spell shit out. There's stuff, and there's not just that, there's the defacing of things that will spell out the message. There are words that are emblazoned on the screen. There's Tessa Thompson's character wearing those earrings, which I'm telling you, the earrings and her fashion and her style, that is going to be a thing. Before the end of the year, that is going to be, I'm telling you.
Yeah, well, we all, knowing that, we already sell the earrings on our merch site, and a lot of people are doing that. But it also will affect it'll affect style that people create themselves, and people will be making their own slogans that
Did she have any influence on that at all, or was that?
Well, that part that was written in the script.
Okay.
We worked together on figuring out what her look on her hair would be. Like, I mean, one of the things is she's Tessa Thompson, and I didn't want people just looking at the screen being like, that's Tessa Thompson. I wanted her to be able to escape into the character. So one of the things that I really was wanting was a different look for her. And so we talked about it and sent pictures back and forth and came up with the hairstyle, and that was one that she was very hyped on. And then her and the costume designer came up with, we knew who the character was. Is that character is maybe new to a lot of people as far as this fashion style, but it's definitely very Bay Area. And so, going off of that, her and our amazing costume designer Deirdre Govan, they came up with a great bunch of stuff, and her look. I mean, it's also in the makeup, like her look, like she's playing a character that's an artist that uses her whole self as a canvas as well, and so even her makeup look is changing scene to scene. And this was a movie where we had 61 locations and we shot it in 28 days, and her look was changing with each scene. So there was a lot to do, that just a lot of energy put into stuff that in independent film people don't normally do.
Sure.
Put into. So from the production design and the details about little things that people are like, why are you spending that time on that? Or, to makeup and costume and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
So, I mean, the look is something that obviously you're passionate about, because even like what you're wearing as you're on the podcast is like, it's so badass. It's like, I'm just a big fan of DIY fashion, because I think fashion is, I'm not into brands or any of that stuff. It's like, no, I'm into like, I'm going to take my own thing. Cause I mean, I grew up in Detroit, like, and I had to like make my own shirts, because we would just do stencils and spray paint, because that was the cheap way. I'm not going to buy the official shirt. F that. I can make like a, I don't know, Dead Kennedys or Black Flag t-shirt myself. Like, why would I pay that money? So I don't know. That was just, I love that DIY fashion. I think it's like a big, and the fact that it wasn't just about the look and the fashion, it was about what was being said through it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, being someone that has done that myself, I think that's what people are doing. Like, these buttons are all ones that I got it and was like, wow, okay, this makes people think about this or that or whatever. And being a kid that did do that too, a similar version of that, I like that I was able to have one of the characters represent that. So, yeah.
So, what went into the development of the script? Did you do telemarketing at some point, or was it like, or some mundane job that?
No, I did telemarketing. I did it during college, and then I did it again between our second and third albums. Well, after my second album, which I thought would be my last, because I quit doing music in my mind so that I could organize. I needed a job that would allow me the time to organize, and I knew I was good at sales, so I was good enough at telemarketing that I could work one day every 2 weeks and and make enough. I mean, I didn't have kids at the time or anything like that, but make enough so that I could spend the rest of the time organizing.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's like the aspect of it that really bugged me, because I'm a creative person, and to do well at that job, you could use all of your creative energy, all of your creative power to figure out how to get someone to give you money. And you know that, and that's like what's happening now. Like, because of the way our system is created, you have people that are maybe could be making culture shifting art that just touches people's souls and lasts for centuries, you know, and but they're somewhere figuring out what font can help a company sell more cereal.
Right.
and they're putting all of their energy into that, or making this commercial or that, you know, and it's a shame. And for me, my version of that was when I was doing telemarketing, and because we had already had a couple albums out, I had enough confidence in myself that, you know, as an artist, people people reacted well to what I did, but this was just the thing that that worked for the political life that I was having.
Well, one of the things that that kind of stuck out to me too was the fact that I feel like this is a movie where after people watch it, they're going to definitely have a lot of different opinions about what it was about. And for me, I think that's always a good thing. You know, like I look at Donald Glover. You know, This Is America, This Is America video. You know, people watch that, and it's funny how so many people can watch that video and get so many different meanings out of it. You know, like the same 5 people can watch it and see 5 different, completely different viewpoints and meanings of what he was trying to say. And I kind of feel like this is, you know, with your movie, they're going to have the same reaction. They're going to watch it, and you know, someone's going to see, you know, a point of view of capitalism and it kind of going awry. They're going to see, you know, just different viewpoints. And was that your goal in the film? Was trying to get people to have, like?
Well, I think, you know, I have a definite viewpoint about things. So, for instance, when I'm talking to the actors about their character, well, first I wrote all the characters as an aspect of me, like they're all parts of me, and but when I talk to the actors about it, I never was like, what your character is doing is wrong.
Right.
Because we all believe everything we're doing is the right choice for that time or whatever. And so for it to be real, I had to come at it from that standpoint. However, I mean, writing it and laying out the story, my reason for telling the story, there's a definite viewpoint in it. It's just that I have a viewpoint on many different things. And at the same time, I know that what's most important is people. You caring about the people involved and what they're going through, not some macro level idea of what this thing is talking about and what this thing is saying. That is only interesting if you care about the people involved. And so, yeah, I what I wanted people to get from it was definitely a few main ideas, but there are all these other little comments that it's making that could be had. But I also, I didn't want something that was just didactic in saying, and cutting people off and where they couldn't interpret it.
Sure, of course.
In certain ways, but yeah.
I guess it's a comedy that makes commentary on race, class, capitalism, exploitation of workers, like also our culture. There's that one show, what is it? Kick the shit out of me?
I got the shit kicked out of me.
I got the shit kicked out of me. I feel like that's kind of already, we're already there in many ways. It's not science fiction in the sense of it's some future and an abstract attacking abstracts. It's really discussing stuff that's happening now in a near future that's today. So that you can also make it funny is an achievement. I don't know what my question is. I'm just saying that for anyone listening to this, you have to see this. We're actually leaving out specific things about the film that I think must be kept secret in order to fully enjoy it. But was that your intention? I'm gonna do a comedy, but I want to push buttons. I want to push people. I want to hit people's triggers. I really want to go for it.
Yeah, I don't think I thought about it that clearly in that sense. When I sat down to write it the first time, I had some general ideas about it, but of a couple plot points. But other than that very first scene, which is an interview scene that is somewhat based on a friend of mine, after that I took the ride with Cassius. and just was like, okay, I guess this is what's happening next. I guess this is what's happening now. And I, but the way I approach art all the time is I'm honest with myself and honest with what I think about the world. And I knew all of those things were going to go in there. And just me in general, how I talk about the world is, often said to be, with humor and fun. So I didn't even know that it would be like a comedy necessarily. It's just, because I don't think any of the actors, none of them are playing it as a comedy. They're just playing it like straight, like real. And I know that I knew that it was going to be funny because some of these things are funny. There's one of what I think is one of the funniest scenes in the movie where there is an argument between Sal and Cassius.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually something that happened to my brother. So
that was a hilarious scene.
Yeah. And so it's I don't think I was like, I want to do that. I know I wanted it to. I know that with all the work that I've ever done, I want it to be substantial. I want it to be something that someone doesn't feel like they wasted their time doing. And I also know I want people to engage with it in a different way. I don't want to. One reason that it does things that you're not expecting is because, I wanted people to be on edge, to not get comfortable and think they know what the movie is doing. Oh, now I'm waiting for this part. I could go to the bathroom now because this is the part where they talk about what's going to happen at the end. There's a lot of movies you can do that.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I wanted to set up that rhythm to where people are like, oh, I better not go to the bathroom now because I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen and I may miss an important part. And so that they engage with it in the same way that, hopefully we can engage in life, like not necessarily knowing what's coming next.
Well, and then there's just that, one of the parts of the movie that really kind of struck me is just how even something tragic can be capitalized on, marketed, talking about the can, how something that even started kind of pure, at a protest, can even corrupt people when money is thrown at them, So yeah, like that kind of stuff. And again, it's so now.
There's a statement in the movie that kind of happens a little bit about how capital will basically co-opt any aesthetic that we think is rebellious. And so it's really more of a comment on the ineffectiveness of aesthetic rebelliousness. Like when it's just like, oh, this is the badass. I mean, think about this. Like rock and roll is supposed to be badass because it's it has this feeling like it's rebellious, right? Like because it was at one point, right? But it was at one point simply aesthetically rebellious, and maybe earlier than that, it was rebellious in the sense that it came from black people and it was talking about things that were going on in that life. But when it gets boiled down to just it being an aesthetic rebellion and it's different, you can put any politic on there that you want. And then, so that rebellious aesthetic of rock and roll is now more used to sell you cars than it is to do any damage to the state or to capitalism. And it's not rebellious at all, but we think of it as an aesthetic, a rebellious aesthetic.
Yeah, I was going to say, just kind of jumping on that, same thing with rap. Rap started out as, guys in the streets. We couldn't afford instruments, so we made our own with turntables, and eventually it got a little it got political with Public Enemy and groups like that. And
I not that this is the subject. I have to say I always disagree with that origin story. We couldn't afford instruments. If they could in Alabama, where people didn't have shoes in the 20s, have instruments.
Well, it's not. I'm sorry. It's not. It's not so much the instruments, but I know in the 80s, Reagan stopped the music programs, right? Like for a lot of the inner cities.
Yeah.
And so it's not so much maybe the instruments, but just to be able to learn how to play these instruments.
Yeah.
Like those programs
I mean, that's a longer discussion.
Sure.
I think that's part of the thing. There were a lot of quote unquote hip hop pioneers that were trying to get money for lecturing at schools at the time when that sort of theory got pushed forward. But I think that hip hop is more like the history is more about the history of black folks all over, because people were rapping in the early 70s when I was in Detroit.
Very true.
When I was in Detroit, and we did it to Hambone. It had nothing to do with New York. And when Sugar Hill Gang got something on the radio, later on when I was in Oakland and it was being played on the radio, me and somebody else were like, "Oh, they got a Hambone song on the radio." And even without that anecdote, when it came around to black communities, nobody was like, "What is this newfangled contraption they call hip hop?" It wasn't like this is new. It was like, this is us. This is already part of our thing. And in the 60s, they had Pigmeat Markham, Here Come the Judge. It was basically the same style as those Sugar Hill Gang records.
Right.
But there's this whole who put the peanut butter in the chocolate at what date in this at this party in the Bronx sort of discussion about it, and you don't talk about any other cultural things like that. But
there was a time though where rap was kind of considered, at least among people who weren't black, dangerous music,
Mm-hmm.
and
no, I agree with that part of it. I'm just saying, as far as
Dan Quill and his wife, and these conservative Republicans going after rap artists because of their music and their dangerous.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. I was just talking about just the origin of like people being too broke to have.
No, but you're right though. Rap went from that to hey, look how much money I have. Look how many dollar bills I could throw at the strip club. Look at
and I also rap was that in the 80s too. That's what we were listening to. Schoolie D, all those Run DMC. That's what they used to rap about. Look how much money I got. It's been that. It's not really like there was the safe old times and there's the new, it's as long as we've been under capitalism, blues talking about that stuff too,
Right. But I guess because I'm from LA, like NWA for me, like growing up was like, they were pretty rebellious, man. Like they were talking about things that weren't cool to talk about, about guys dying in the streets and
definitely
stuff like that, and I just feel like that voice got silenced somewhere.
Yeah,
like that kind of street reporting, I guess you could say, in the hip hop community.
Yeah. I think definitely there's parts of it that got silenced. There's also though like NWA talked about having money and all that kind of stuff too. But I think that what we're seeing is the further and further away you go from like having large movements that actually are aimed at changing material wealth distribution.
Right.
The more you get into art that accepts capitalism as the only way.
Right.
And so and that's with music and film, and and so you have this. You're right. You have this aesthetic that I just, because I was like involved in organizing at the time when like those groups were coming out, I was very aware of what. And thinking about it from the standpoint of what ideas some of these things were co-signing. And I'm a giant Cube fan. Ice Cube fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, to a certain extent, I think like early on, I was really trying to sound like Ice Cube. But yeah, I don't think the content has changed as much as people say it has. I think the style has definitely changed.
Sure. And maybe because there is more money in rap now than it was back then, guys can floss a little bit harder now than they did back in, say, 85, or maybe the early 90s.
Yeah. Well, in the early 90s, people were flossing big. I mean, how much do you think a chain like the one Big Daddy Kane wore costs?
I'm sure it costs a lot.
Like all the gold that Biz Markie and Slick Rick. I mean, Slick Rick was wearing like $500,000 worth of jewelry.
That's true.
Whether it was
real
real or not, I don't know, but that was the claim.
Right.
That was the you know what I'm saying?
You could make an indie film with that, $500,000.
Back then, yeah, of course you could.
But even back then, a lot of rappers were caught like, oh, they're only renting this, and they're all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's. I think with all music, you get into this. Oh, there was the good old days, and the new stuff is indicative of the culture of the people that are producing it being lesser than in some way. And in reality, I think a lot of the same things were happening. I mean, we used to listen to Run DMC, Houdini, all these folks. They were like talking about things where economically we're like, really, you could do that?
Yeah.
That sort of stuff. I mean, special ed, all that kind of stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff was so outrageous that he said that we wouldn't have believed that he was able to do it.
Sure.
And he obviously wasn't, but somebody else could make that song and we believe that he could actually do, like, I bought an island of my very own or something like that. Somebody could believe that someone now could do that. I don't know.
Well, and to me, that's kind of what, going back to the movie, that's what, maybe that's why I related to the character so much, because I just felt like, when you're young and broke, especially in being black in those days, I mean, you dream about that kind of thing. You dream about having that kind of money, that kind of success. And when someone comes at you with numbers, with a check and says, we need you to do this, it's really hard to say, you know what, I got enough integrity to say no to this or to push it away. It's not 9 times out of 10, somebody's taking that check, regardless of their principles, Yeah. And it's something you almost hate about yourself, that you would take that money, and you see it in the character that he fought not taking that money, but and I'm not saying whether he does or doesn't. I'm just saying, but when presented with with that kind of temptation, it's just hard to say no.
Yeah, I mean, and that's especially with lack of a movement. There's choices that I've made along my career that were hard choices, that were similar choices where one way I would have really hated myself and the other way I could have been a little bit more comfortable. But it was only me having years of being involved with the movement that actually guided me. And by being involved in a movement, I mean other people, being in an organization with a plan. Because otherwise, people are just on their own, and one way is doing something symbolically the right thing, but has no bearing on what you want to do in life, and the other way is money that can make your life better, and in many ways. So if there's no movement, no group of people that are working with a plan, then it all becomes theoretical, and you make the one choice that actually could have a material benefit to your life immediately at least.
Sure.
I'm excited to see. They're telling me I got to wrap up because you got like a big press tour that you're on at the moment. But I'm just excited that the film is getting a wide release in like the middle of July 16th, 13th, like wide release. And to see a film that deals with such radical topics get that wide of a release, I hope that Between the Laughs people can start a conversation, because one of my favorite, we burst out laughing when there's a scene he goes to the VIP room, and you find out, like in all things in life, the VIP room is never as good as you think it's going to be. And I think it's never as good. It's always just good to just hang with your friends in the non-VIP.
It's almost like kind of like a metaphor for the movie, actually, if you think about it.
I love that.
It's never as good as you think it's going to be.
Never as good as you think it's. I love that scene. It's a simple scene, and it's just like I just thought that was it really set the tone. And
yeah, well, thanks. I mean, yeah, I hope folks really get a chance to go see this. I'm really excited about all of that, and I think that it is time for. There was this survey done by this right-wing think tank. I don't know. I'll post it up, and I have posted it before. It was done a year ago, and Harvard also did a similar thing. But this right-wing think tank, I'm talking about them because they had a different reaction to it. This right-wing think tank did a survey of 4,200 millennials. They found that 1 in 2 millennials think that there should be a socialist society. Usually, the film world is way behind or way to the right of the politics of the actual population. And they try to use all sorts of things to justify why they are that way, that they're being safe in some way. Usually, and this is a film that actually it's not really that radical. It's actually just right there where most people's minds are at, and we usually don't get that in film, and luckily we were able to do that.
Boots, thanks for coming by the Film Thread podcast.
Yeah, we appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
like I remember, I was supposed to see the movie a couple of weeks ago, and because of an illness, I couldn't make it. But I was glad I got to go watch it this week. And yeah, guys, definitely go watch it, man. It's a trip. You're gonna like it, enjoy it. Take your girlfriends or boyfriends or others to go watch it with them.
Yeah. This is definitely something that's meant to be seen with a bunch of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's a social activity. It's one you're gonna want to talk to about with people that have just experienced it.
Thank you, Boots.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely thank you.
Thank you. Sorry
to bother you. You got to see it. All right.
Cool.